So all you're going to do is Doug Nelson from Wayne. A short story for Doug. He was real interested in wind towers 15 years ago. And now he'll tell you his story. He sees it different. So let's welcome Doug.
Thank you everybody for coming today, Sunday afternoon. And if you have a question, just shoot it up to me. You know, if it isn't going to be a big question, it's going to take an hour to debate, just shoot me up a question. Before you forget what your question is. I get sidetracked pretty easy off on a tangent, forget where I'm at, so a question isn't going to bother me anyway. Probably sidetrack me a little bit in a different position, but I got a lot of stuff to cover. The first information meeting I put on was done at the Pioneer dealership in Wayne. And we had a good turnout. It took 2 hours and 45 minutes to get through. I don't tend to do that. I'm more efficient now. But we're here to exercise our freedom of speech. And as Steve mentioned, this is an information meeting. So I'd like you to rise, take a look at that piece of cloth right there, and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
About 15 years ago, a high school friend of mine was promoting wind turbines. He got me all excited. I had the perfect location. A farm on a ridge, irrigation well in the middle, a high voltage power line went right down the middle of the section. We're in the building windmills. Right next to that power line in the dry land sandy corner. Wasn't very productive ground there anyway, and we're going to use that thing to run our irrigation well. Well, I thought we would naturally have an extension cord of some sort going over my irrigation well. No, that won't work, because when the wind starts slowing down, your voltage drops, you'll burn up your motor. This is all going out on the grid, and in the transaction that will prove you're using renewable energy, therefore qualify you for all the tax credits, is going to be a paper transaction. There was going to be a net metering arrangement with Northeast Public Power. For the first 10 megawatts of power generated in a renewable form at that time frame. Net metering means that if I generate power, they'll buy it from me at retail price. And I can buy it back when I need it at retail price. I checked it out, and it was a political sort of a decision that they had made, you know, to promote the first 10 megawatts of renewable energy. So I was, got to thinking about that a little bit. A couple of things come to mind. Number one, if I'm selling power to the power company at retail price, and they're taking it over to Steve's place and selling to him for retail price, they're not making much money on that transaction, are they? So at 3 o'clock in the morning, when the big wind takes down the power lines, like we had last week, big wind, little ice, a few power lines back down, they're short of cash to put that line back up there. They're paying triple overtime or whatever they have to pay to rebuild it. So when the board meeting shows up in spring, board members are talking about the expense of that ice store, a little short of cash there. Guess we'll have to raise the rates. So I get a postcard in the mail that says, rates are going up. So I pick up the phone, call my windmill salesman, my good friend, and say, hey Dave, rates went up. Want to build me another windmill? Get the idea here? Yeah, there's a formula to make rates go up. So, the second thing I thought of is, you know what? In July and August, when I need to pump some water, everything's hot. There's no real reason for wind to blow. Everything's hot. You know, if you got, in the springtime, we get a lot of wind because things are warming up, and some things are still cold. So this air is going up, This year's coming down and we get wind and we get currents and we get storms, and it's a normal natural course of things. But in July and August, the spray planes come out. And they like it, and that's the time we need them. Problem is, my windmill's not going to be running when I need to irrigate. Well, I presented that question. He said, no problem. You save your money, you sell your power this time of year in the winter when the wind's blowing, and then you buy it back at the same price you sold it when you need it. Like an idea, right? Well, let's take a look at it. Here's our first graph of the night. Okay, here's your base load power requirements right here, pretty steady. This is the power you use every day of the year, regardless of the season. Your lights, your stove, your refrigerator, that sort of thing. Base load. Coal plants, nuclear plants, fire up, let them run. They can make that power very cheap to you because they sell everything they produce. Base load people. So here's a summer peak. Okay? It's getting hotter, drier, top out for a couple weeks, and it trails back down to the base load here. Everybody see that? Air conditioners, fans, sprinklers, irrigators, everything has to do with hot weather cause this peak here. This is a very expensive time to generate electricity because you've got to have a plant sitting there just waiting to fire up for about 2 weeks. Gas plants work pretty good for that. And they sell their power for 2 weeks and shut down. Maintenance costs, everything else, depreciation, those kind of expenses continue whether you're selling power or not. So the price that we pay for electricity is based on the spread between the base load here and our peaks. This spread here kind of determines the price of electricity because this cheap power gets averaged in with this really high power, expensive power, and they create a price that we pay all year long. Now, some companies are moving to meters that will charge you electricity at the market rate at the time you use it in an attempt to get this peak down. That's coming. But here's the deal. If I am generating electricity during base load, when the grid really doesn't need any peaking electricity with my windmill, wind's blowing, but we're using base load today, I'm going to cut into the saleability. Let's say you owned a coal plant and you're used to selling everything you generate, but the law says, the PURPA law, Public Utilities Regulatory Act, says that a public utility or a utility company must buy power from a renewable source rather than a fossil fuel source if and when it's available. So all of a sudden they're not buying it from you, they're buying it from me. So you're generating power here, now lowering the base load, so to speak, but you're still generating power because wind might quit blowing over here, and if you're not still hot, you'll lose business. Okay, so here's what happens in spring when the wind's blowing, and here's what happens when the wind is not blowing. I come back to the grid and say, I want to run my pivot. I'm increasing the demand here at the peaking situation. Guess what happened? I just widened the spread here between the base load and the peak. That means we'll all be paying more for electricity. So, if you got that imprinted, go ahead and erase for me, and I'll tell you one more situation that the engineer in Wayne, Nebraska told me. He said, think about a situation like this. It's hot, it's dry, and there's big high pressure going over the center of the United States. There's not a windmill turning, and this happened in 2017 from Texas to Canada. There's not enough wind to turn a pinwheel. Big high pressure system right in the middle of the United States. It's hot and it's dry. And the irrigators are going, and people are buying window air conditioners because the central air can't keep up, and they put it in the window of their bedroom and they plug it in the wall, you know, and the power lines get a little hotter yet. We're just right next to a blackout. Right next to a rolling blackout. But there's a big cold front coming our way. And the engineer's sitting there watching his gauges at the power company. He's watching that cold front. By golly, about 3 o'clock in the morning, it gets here. It hits this hot, humid air, and bang, and we've got lightning and rain. And the windows come open. Power demand pivot shut off. Power demand drops like a rock. Man, thank goodness that rain came just in time. The old engineer's up all night long and the phone rings. It's the wind company. They said, hey, I hear you're a little short of power over there. Well, that cold front brought a big northwest wind, and these wind turbines are really whirling. But we're clear back down to the base load. They don't have any place to go with their power. Well, the engineer didn't like that comment very good, so he just hung up the phone. He's crabby today. Been up all night. So, wind company lets him sleep on it, and the next morning, right away at coffee time, they call him up. Say, hey, first thing, don't hang up the phone. We got to talk. We got so much power over here. These windmills are running, you know, like goose grinders. And we need to get rid of some power. We'll pay you $1.50 a kilowatt just to take this stuff. And the engineer said, well, what are we going to do with that? Clear down to the base load, you know, rain, cool off. I can't help it if the wind's blowing, that's your problem. Well, he said, just take it. We'll pay you to take it. Well, he walks over to the wall where he's got his map of all his power lines, all his three-phase, all his disconnects, all his substations. And he realizes he got a substation right up here he doesn't need today. So he shuts off a few switches and turns on a few switches, makes sure everybody's got power, and he brings that windmill power right in the front side of this thing, and out the back runs it in the ground. Why? Because the tax credit on renewable energy is more than the value of the wind energy. A project manager from NextEra told me, I asked him, I said, well, what do you sell your power for? And he said, well, we got a long-term contract with Omaha Public Power for $1.50 a kilowatt hour. They'll take all we can generate when it's available. So, whether they need it or not. That means that they're going to shut off a coal plant or shut off a nuke plant and take it from the wind company, because that's what the contract says with the wind company for $1.50 a kilowatt hour. Now that's pretty cheap, but that's the wholesale price of wind energy about 2-3 years ago when I had this meeting with the project manager. I believe he would tell me the truth. So, let's do this, 0.015, that's dollars per kilowatt hour, or simply 1.5 cents. But the production tax credit, at the time I did my calculations, that they have improved and increased quite a bit because of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. At this time, that was 2.3 cents a kilowatt hour. So if you take 0.023 and divide it by 0.015, this is dollars now, but this is 1.5 cents, and this is 2.3 cents. This is 153%. Drop the decimal. So this is 153% more than this, coming from me and you in the form of a production tax credit. And that's just one instance that's involved with wind energy. But, so, they could pay the power company 1.5 cents here to take the power and destroy it, and they could still pocket from you and me 2.3 cents. Because they're sending the power out their meter onto the grid, whether we need it or not, but they made arrangements not to overload the grid with power, which will cause a blackout also because they don't trip breakers. So they got to keep the power on the grid balanced. So that's very, very important. And then there's a big problem with that with wind turbines we'll get to later. 153% more. Okay, that's a kind of a shocker. But here's the rest of the story. Do we have any accountants in here? Do we have any politicians in here? Do we have any farmers in here? Do we have any wind pro people, any wind representatives from companies in here? Next question. Do we have any representatives from wind companies that did not raise their hand? I had a meeting like this Tuesday night at a little country church, Vigor, South Dakota. Now here I'm deviating, I'll be back. 230 people showed up. Found out a couple of days later that we had 5 wind people embedded in the crowd. Didn't say a word. 2 engineers, one of them flew in from Florida, especially for my meeting, and 3 project managers. Didn't say a word. I'm willing to debate those guys. Shoot me a question an hour later. We'll talk. I don't care. Just if I'm doing anything that's not correct here, I want to know about it. The sooner the better, so I don't perpetuate something that's not correct. That's all I have to say for the wind guys. I don't want to talk to them in the back alley. I like to talk to them in a meeting like this. So here we go. If I had an accountant in here, here's a question I asked him. Or if I had a politician here, like I did, Mike Thompson, 2 years ago, down in Belleville, Kansas. Mike was sitting about right there. And I said, Mike, and I said this at the beginning of the meeting, I said, Mike, I got a question for you. A little later on in my presentation. And if you can answer it, that's great. And if you cannot answer it, that's the point I'm trying to make. So here comes the question, Mike. That crowd was just listening, you know, because I warned him before. They said, Mike, if a tax credit, in fact, was cash, what type income would it be? And then I helped him a little. I said, would it be taxable income or tax-free income? Right away he said it's tax-free. He got it. He knew it. Why is a tax credit analogous to tax-free money? Because a tax credit is a non-deductible expense. If you get a credit, now this is not cash, if you get a credit on a non-deductible expense, namely taxes, it's exactly the same as tax-free money. And the value of a tax credit depends on the magnitude of your tax bracket. So if you're in the 0% tax bracket, a tax credit to you is just worthless. If you're in the 50% tax bracket, what do you think happens to the value of a tax credit? It doubles. Steve, let's say you and I each had a very good year, and let's just say we had $2 million of taxable money, and we're each in the 50% tax bracket, and a politician comes up to us and says, I can give you $1 million tax credit, or I can give you $2 million worth of additional taxable income. Steve, you get first pick on this, and I'll take what's left over. We'll run the numbers both ways. Which one do you want? Do you want $2 million cash you got to pay taxes on, or do you want another, or do you want $1 million tax credit? That's your choice. Either way, we're both going to be in the 50% tax bracket. That's as high as you could get, and that's where we're going to stay, regardless of whether you take the $2 million or not. Which one do you want?
Credit.
He'll take the credit. Guess I'll just have to take the $2 million cash. How's that? Okay. So he's looking at $1 million tax liability because he made $2 million. He doesn't have to write that check because I gave him, or the politician gave him, a tax credit for $1 million. So he uses his tax credit, so he don't have to even write a check. Now he's got $2 $2 million left in his bank, taxes paid, used the credit to pay the taxes. His own money, cleaned up money, tax-free. Me, on the other hand, I took the other $2 million. I gotta pay taxes on $4 million. I'm still on the 50% tax bracket. I gotta write a check. So I write a check for $2 million. I also have $2 million left in the bank when I get done paying my taxes. So you can very clearly see that for a man in the 50% tax bracket, a tax credit's value is double its face value. That's why they build windmills. That's why they build solar. That's why they build pipelines. Because of tax credits and the fact that the value of the tax credit increases with the magnitude of your tax bracket. And that's why very, very high income companies like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and Morgan Chase Bank are involved with these projects. I've got the investors here somewhere of NextEra, for instance. That's the only U.S.-based wind company that I know of. And the rest of them are based in foreign countries, and they come over here and make a domestic corporation, and then they make shell companies like LLCs that come out of that thing, that come out here and build wind turbines. NextEra is based in Florida, but the four top investors are, I think it's State Street, BlackRock, Vanguard, and Morgan Stanley, Morgan Chase. It's a big bank. One of those big banks, four top investors in that company. And those guys like foreign investments. Those top three companies, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, together, when Mr. Ramaswamy wrote this book, right here, Capitalist Punishment, a really good book to read if you really want to dig into what's going on in this country. Those three companies alone are worth over $20 trillion. That's a lot of money. That's a little bit of background here, and of course I got myself off the subject here, but what I want to do now is compare apples to apples. When you sell power for 1.5 cents, that's income, that's taxable income. Tax credits are not. Okay, one more thing about tax credits. It is easy to get a tax credit from the government because you lobby a senator and tell him, you give me this tax credit, you get that passed, it won't show up on the government's books because they don't see it you're getting money. It's not a transaction. If they send you money, they got to account for taxes collected. It's off the books. It's a credit. You don't get a 1099 for a credit. It's a tax break. The taxes that those companies pay are taxes that we either have to pay in addition to the ones they're not paying to make up for the difference, or we have to assume more national debt to make up the difference. Either way, we're going to compare apples to apples. Taxable number, they're paying a company, they gotta pay the companies its income, they gotta pay taxes, but this is not a taxable number. But 2.3 cents would be 4.6 cents in a taxable form for a man in the 50% tax bracket. This would be the taxable form of this, because if he paid 50% of this in taxes, you have 2.3 cents left. So to compare apples to apples, we got to have 4.6 cents divided by 0.015 to calculate the true subsidy. This is 307%, rounding the decimal. Bet you didn't know that. There's the numbers to prove it. Tax credits. It's a magic subsidy. So, okay. Give me a I'm going to give you a break from numbers here for a second. What's the main reason we are led to believe that we need solar, wind?
Doug?
All right, what's the main reason why we need solar, wind, carbon pipelines, all that kind of stuff? We're led to believe, well, why? Tax credits. No, not tax credits.
Environmental.
Environmental. Climate change. Well, when I was in college, back in the 70s, they were talking about the new ice age. Man, by 1986, if we don't do something, we're going to be covered with ice. New ice age is coming. Well, when we were in class, it kind of concerned us. But when we were out of class, having a social meeting down at the fraternity house, we were planning our social functions around snowbank melting contests. You know, that sounds like kind of fun. You know, we want to do our part to prevent the new ice age. Well, guess what happened? Pretty soon, the new ice age didn't happen, and they decided to call it global warming. Well, pretty soon that didn't happen either, so they settled on climate change. And Al Gore flew all over the world, made $1 billion talking about climate change. And he managed to convince enough people, and convince enough politicians that we need lots and lots of tax credits to fight climate change. Sounds like a really good idea. Well, here's the facts. You got the sun right here in the middle. And you got planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and about 5 more of them scattered around here. Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, way over here. It's so cold you can't stand it. Mercury, so hot you can't stand it. But here's the Earth. We're the third rock from the sun, you know. But it's about right. Well, these planets orbit the sun, and every once in a while, like a couple of years ago, the 2 largest planets, Jupiter and Saturn, with its 3 little rings, they got lined up really close. And because of the mass of these 2 planets, they pull the orbit of the Earth into an elliptical form. A little bit like this. And many years later, those 2 planets, maybe a couple more, will be off over here. And guess what? They pull her right back where she came from. So the mass and gravity of the sun counteracts the centrifugal force of these planets' orbit, so they'll stay in orbit. It's a pretty good balance. But the difference here is 3.1 million miles farther from the sun than it is over here. Climate change is normal, inevitable, and most likely will always be that way, no matter what we do here on Earth. You see, all the energy on Earth here originates from the sun. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, and for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So, keep those 2 laws of physics in mind, and the energy comes to the Earth in the form of light. It's absorbed, turns into heat. With heat, light, water, and minerals in the soil, we can raise a corn crop. And with a corn crop, we can raise a hamburger. And the hamburger keep us going pretty good. So when we oxidize that hamburger through the metabolic process, we're taking the carbon out of it. We're mixing that carbon that comes back out of the hamburger with the oxygen we inhale, and we exhale CO2, and it can go right over here and grow another corn crop. Just a wonderful balanced cycle. What that on is the axis of the Earth. You see, the Earth is tilted. It spins around a tilted axis like that. But it's got a wobble. It'll wobble a little this way and take a long time to get to the end of the wobble. And if I understand right, we're about to the end of a wobble cycle here. And then it'll turn around and it'll wobble back this way. So today our axis is there. You know, a few 100,000 years from now, it might, well, it isn't going to be vertical, but it might be a little more like this, or a little more like that. The Earth wobbles. So here's the sun. Say that's the sun, and here's your equator. That's assuming we were straight up and down. Our equator will be coming across like this. But you see, with the wobble, the direct impact of the sun on the Earth is going to shift a little north and gradually shift a little south as this Earth wobbles back and forth. And so we take that as obvious climate change, which it is. You can't deny climate change. On the other hand, you're probably not going to do much about either this or that, except make a whole lot of money while you're trying to do it. There you go. Okay, we're going to go back and look at some numbers here. Does everybody know how big a megawatt is? How big is it in units of electricity? A megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts. So keep that in mind. And when they build turbines, they generally refer to the turbines as a 4 megawatt, 5 megawatt, 4.5 megawatt. A 4.5 megawatt turbine will be 600 to 650 feet tall. That's about where we're at today, and they've been getting taller all the time. So 1 megawatt here equals 1,000 kilowatts. And these are units of electricity. So if you have a generator large enough, they label it on the nameplate 1 megawatt, run it for 1 hour, you will get 1 megawatt hour of power. Or you will get 1,000 kilowatt hours of power, and that's what we are familiar with. That's what we buy from the utility company. That's what we pay for, kilowatt hours. But the turbines in the Schultz project, the manager told me, were 40% efficient. So that would be like if you're 40%, let's say your county needed 40 pickups, and it had to buy 1,000 of them just to have 40 of them running at any given time. That's 40% efficient. So keep that in mind. So if you have 1 megawatt size generator, now I'm not talking about one turbine, just 1 megawatt of generating capacity. Take that times 40%, and it equals 400 kilowatt hours. That's how much 1 megawatt will generate at 40% efficiency. So, remember what the wholesale price of that Schultz project was? 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour? What's 1.5 cents times 400? 400 times 1.5 cents equals how many dollars here? Can somebody? Well, if it was 1 cent, it would be $4. It's 1.5 cents, so it would be $6. Anybody got a disagreement with that? This thing is producing $6 worth of power at 1.5 cents a kilowatt at 40% efficiency. There's the numbers. That's why I wanted an electrician here to verify it. So now we know what our income is, our legitimate income. No tax credits, no grants, no nothing. Okay, well, let's go over here. I just happen to have an article here that I calculated the cost of a megawatt of wind generating capacity. It wasn't listed as such in the article, but it had total cost and it had total megawatts, and I just picked up the calculator, and it came up to $2.4 million per megawatt. That's what it costs to build one. Now, I've got numbers that are more, I got numbers that are less, and I built my cash flow built based on a cost of $2.4 million per megawatt of generating capacity. There's lots of expenses involved with wind turbines, but I just picked 9 of them. And I run this by my accountant, and he said, you're conservative in all these. I used IRS percentages for common ordinary expenses. Assuming I had a $2.4 million machine, I took 10% depreciation. That happens to be $240,000 on a $2.4 million megawatt. I took 5% for repairs and maintenance, $120,000. I took 5% for labor, another $120,000. Keep in mind, when you take your pickup to the shop, you look at the parts, you look at the labor, a lot of times they're almost the same. You ever notice that?
Yes.
Okay. I took 1%, I calculated for insurance. That would be $24,000. I took 1% for taxes, property taxes, that's $24,000. I took, I just figured rent to the landowner per megawatt at $10,000. I calculated backup power. When the wind's not blowing, there must be backup power sitting there somewhere, and I calculated that on the basis of the numbers that I have to pay myself as an irrigator if I need to pump on peak. That came out to $120,000. I calculated interest. I was conservative. I used 3%. 3% of 2.4 million is $72,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm missing a couple expenses here. I'm going to cheat. Legal fees and legal fees. I calculated. I just picked a number. I said $5,000 to pay our attorney to do leases and things, just to account for it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
You have rent in the wrong place there.
Oh, I got
Your rent one, you
Oh,
forgot
rent's
to write
here.
something down.
There we go. Okay, backup power. Backup power. I got it. We're online here, and this is $735,000. My estimated cost as a farmer, based on combines, tractors. These are just 9 common, ordinary, everyday costs, and these percentages, according to my accountant, will fit the ramifications or the specification, the parameters of the IRS. So I just put together an artificial cash flow based on numbers, hypothetical. These are annual cost of operation. Go back here. There we go. This is per hour. Take that times 80 60 hours in a year, and you get 80, let me think. No, you get 70, no, you get 52,560. That's what this is times every hour of the year. 52,560. 3% over here, 3% interest, $72,000 interest. We're $20,000 short paying the interest over here. This number here divided by all the hours in a year is $84 an hour. So we got $6.84. If you take 6 times 14, and I believe my numbers is right, yeah, there's your $84. You'd have to raise the price of electricity, take that number times 14 to equal this number. That would be like in the 28th, think of February with 28 days in it, and paid your monthly bill every other day that month. You would pay your bill 14 times to get to this. Guys, this is hypothetical. This is just farmer arithmetic. But this is so far out of whack. Windmills won't work without massive, massive subsidies. And they're coming in the form of tax credits, not just the production tax credit. There's other things involved. There's investment tax credits, at least on some of these smaller ones. I think the investment tax credit is primarily reserved for the solar people. But I've got information here. We'll do an estimate on those tax credits based on the information that I have on hand here today. There's also something, you can erase this, there's also something called renewable energy certificates involved with wind turbines. I'll talk about that here for just a minute. Okay, this is the article I've got. If you live in California, you don't like blackouts. And if you live in California, you don't want to see windmills on the beach or out in the ocean. You just don't want it. A lot of high-priced real estate out there. So, you could build wind turbines, wind farms out in the Midwest. And those wind turbines come with renewable power certificates. A Midwestern wind farm, in the normal course of events, can sell the abstract credit known as RPC, or Renewable Power Certificates, to California. California needs credits to meet its renewable power quota, so it is willing to pay for what is a piece of paper. A wind farm can also sell the real electric power separately to someone who is willing to buy electricity that comes without the renewable power attribute. Because the renewable power attribute has been sold to California. This is a legal way to convert power from fossil fuels in California into renewable energy, or to meet a renewable power quota without actual renewable power. So, you can build them wind turbines out here where we don't have a whole lot of opposition, and for millions they can sell those certificates to people in California who don't like to look at wind turbines. But yet California, if they buy these certificates, can generate power with diesel fuel if they want to and call it renewable energy. Okay. I'm gonna have another drink, thanks. before I forget, we talked about climate change, but I didn't talk about microclimates. I'm coming back to whatever I was going to go here. I have got 2 articles here. One of them came out in 2018, and it was Associated Press just made a report. No free lunch for renewables. More wind power would warm the U.S. As it explained, turbines act like ceiling fans as they keep air from stratifying. A ceiling fan, here we got one. You know, in the winter, the cold air likes to go down to the floor. The ceiling fan mixes that, so it's the same temperature here as it is on the floor. It's a comfort thing. Wind turbines do the same thing in nature as they take the cooler air and bring it down and mix it with the warmer air. So consequently, at night, the nighttime temperatures are warmer, according to this article, in the areas of wind farms. Now, about a week ago, another article showed up. Same thing, except this guy elaborated a little bit. And I disagree with him, but he was talking that it might be a benefit to a crop. Didn't say which crop, who had warmer nights. But he also had said there were some negative effects. It would impact humidity, meaning less air moisture downwind of the wind turbines. And so in areas that receive significant rain or limited rain, like the Midwest, the effect is limited, but it could be prominent in drier climates, such as Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. As a corn farmer, I understand that it must cool off at night. Very important, because you got a corn plant here and a tassel up here. You had this nice ear developing here. If it doesn't cool off at night, the cells in the leaves, which are, by the way, called C4 cells, means they got 4 carbons in them. They fill up with carbohydrate. Here we got 6 molecules of water plus 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, and that equals H6, that's O, that's C6H12, O6 plus 6 oxygens plus I'm going to have to cheat. Anyway, here it is. 6 CO2s plus 6 waters equal C6H12 and an oxide. And that, okay, equals that plus 6 O2s, okay. 6 O2s, that's our oxygen, that's what we breathe, that comes off of this plant, because it takes it takes CO2, breaks off the oxygen and keeps the carbon. And it puts the carbon right here. This is starch, sugar, carbohydrate, and it pumps that in the ear. If it does not cool off enough at night, these cells won't get the shrinking treatment from being cold or chilled. And that helps squeeze that sugar juice down here towards the ear. And so that's why we raise better corn up here in the Midwest than they do in South America, because it doesn't chill off much at night. Now that article mentioned lack of humidity because of the mixing of the air. You also need a dew. If you don't have humidity, and if you don't get chilly enough at night, you won't penetrate the dew point, so you won't get a dew. But if you do get a dew, When that evaporates in the morning, when the sun comes up, it gives them one last chilling effect. And it shrinks those cells a little bit more, pumps, squeezes them out. So it's right ready the next morning when the sun comes up to generate some more starches. And this dew will sometimes drip down here and wet the roof wall here like you got a quarter inch of rain. And the dew provides a drink of water for the baby pheasants and little creatures out there. Anyway, if the wind turbines mix the air, cause the temperature to be warmer at night, it'll screw up this process. And if it screws up your yields, 5 or 10 bushel for 10 years, that's a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
We have a couple here who sign a lease, and they have a time frame they need to get going. Could you entertain them with wisdom?
I sure can, thank you. I got a lot of stuff. If you guys get tired, give me your topic you'd like me to hit.
Well, these-
Okay, you guys signed a lease?
We did.
Any
No, I did not do it. My husband signed the lease.
Okay.
Well, hey, it's the truth.
Is that the guy?
No. You were at my church. I was there.
Oh, at Viber?
That was my church, yes. And I live 2 miles from that church.
Okay.
And we're on Turkey Ridge, we were in the Turkey Ridge thing. Okay. So they came around and talked to us and told us to sign up because everybody was signing up.
Yeah, that's a common
So my husband signed up, and I just want you to know, if that's something that you want to do, and that's what you truly believe, then do it. But once you sign up, you can't get out. So if you believe that that's what you want, then do it. But because I'm signed up, I can't get out. And now he's deceased. I'm here with the aftermath, and I don't want it, but I can't get out of it. So that's all I wanted to say, was once you're signed up, you can't go back.
Karen, could you pass out a copy of that construction lien and make sure everybody's seen that construction lien and also those vortices?
I made copies for you that you wanted.
Okay, we got them up here.
Yeah.
There you go. Just make sure everybody sees that, and I'll get on with this. Okay.
Just know the facts. Just know the facts. Educate yourself. Know the facts.
There's some really, really professional, very, very talented smooth windmill salesmen out there. They can sell a refrigerator with us. They are very, very good salesmen. So, okay, say that again. Did one of you guys have a question or two?
Well, I just wondered if that was in your short. The lease was active, the project was complete, they were receiving revenue from that, or what the outcome was?
I think they got 7 years to get the project going.
It's not going out.
Not yet.
Not yet, but 7 years is a long time. There's ways of renewing it too.
This started in 2006.
When?
2006.
Okay.
This got started. It's 24. We're not there yet.
Okay. They got ways of initiating or starting project initiation and resetting that clock. They'll dig a great big hole and they'll pour about 2.5 inches of cement in the bottom. Take a picture of that, send it to the IRS and say, we got project initiation and we got 7 more years. Or some such thing like that. But here's a lease that I understood along the way. The number 2 item here on the first page is purpose of the lease, and it says lessee shall have possession of the property. That is not included in the new leases because it doesn't have to be. It's implied. When you sign a lease, you're signing away possession of your property to the lessee. But it clarifies this. Lessee shall have possession of the property for the following wind energy uses and purposes to be conducted in such locations on the property as lessee may determine. is for purposes of wind energy, and then it goes on the next page and explains what wind energy purposes are, and it's a very, very vague definition. And so, if you're out there farming, kicking up dust or sand, and that sand is blowing through the wind turbine and eroding the blade, they might be able to tell you to shut off, go home. There was an instance down my way. A friend of mine has 80 acres west of Wayne with a turbine on it, and he just was finishing spraying his field. And the wind turbine guys came out there to work, and they could smell the product he was spraying. He was legal, and he was on label, and he was just folding up to leave. And they told him he better be pulling out of there, and they jumped pick up and went to Wayne Hospital for chemical inhalation. So there could be some problems here that you don't think about with this lease. I'm going to talk about construction liens, and if you've seen a copy of that construction lien, this happened. This is the second lien that was filed in Saline County, Nebraska, October 1st, 2021. IEA Constructors filed a $30,852,000 lien, and you can read that on the copy of that lease, copy of that construction lien, against Milligan One Wind. And that's mentioned there, of course, too. On 99 tracts of real estate, that's T99 that's mentioned on there. So 99 tracts of real estate twice got tied up with a construction lien because apparently Milligan One didn't get them paid satisfactorily, and they filed a lien on the real estate. That's just not a good deal. I didn't know they could file a lien on the real estate. I thought they could only go to the lease itself. But they got to the real estate there. So here's a paragraph in this lease, which is a different one than the other one I got. This talks about their obligation in construction liens. I'll read the paragraph. It's got a little legal jargon, but I think you can get the point. Construction liens. Grantee, be the wind turbine people, shall keep the property free and clear of all liens and claims of liens for labor and services performed. Now that sounds pretty good. But then it goes on. Provided, however, that if such lien does arise, grantee has a right to contest such lien, and grantee within 60 days after it receives notice of the filing of such lien either bonds around such lien or establishes appropriate reserves therefore, or otherwise removes such lien from the property pursuant to applicable law, in which case grantee shall not be deemed to have breached this section. Nothing, however, in this section or this agreement shall be construed to prohibit grantee from granting one or more liens on all or any portion of grantee's right, title, or interest under this agreement as security for the repayment of any indebtedness and or the performance of any obligation relating in whole or in part to any wind project. So it says here, they can grant this agreement or their leases as security. In other words, they can borrow money on that. So your legal description may be encumbered with a construction lien. And let's say you have a piece of property worth $1.5 million. And they go down there and talk to the bank and show them the lease. Lease is attached to the deed. I got pages of this in Nebraska, where you can look up on Nebraska deeds online and find all the real estate legal descriptions that are encumbered with a wind turbine lease. So let's say that the wind company has got $1 million loan using their lease for collateral, and the lease is attached to your land, the whole legal description, and then you want to go down to the bank and work out. Can't tell you. I don't know. Good question. But anybody got anything else they want to hear about our leases? I'll just read you one more paragraph. This is on a lease, and in section 10, landowner expressly acknowledges that the wind project will alter the visual, sound, light, and other characteristics of the property, and that the payments provided for in this agreement are intended to compensate landowner for these changes and for all uses of the property permitted and contemplated under this agreement. Landowner therefore expressly waives any claim against grantee relating to or arising from the normal operation of the wind project or wind project facilities on the property, provided that the wind project facilities on the property comply with applicable law. Landowner also acknowledges that certain aspects inherent to the operation of the wind energy facilities may result in some nuisance, such as visual impacts, possible increased noise levels, possible shadow flicker on residences, and other possible effects of electrical generation and transmission, including, without limitation, potential interference with radio, television, telephone, mobile telephone, or other electronic devices. People are signing these. Beats me, I couldn't do it. I don't think an honorable person, an honorable patriotic person, knowing all the details, the full spectrum details of this, could sign one of those leases. Most of these people don't understand many of these aspects, and I've just scratched the surface here. I'm kind of a numbers guy. Now I'm going to get back, if you'll just bear with me, guys. If you've had enough, raise your hand, but I'm going to try to keep you interested as long as I can. Smaller turbines. You've probably seen this ad in your farm magazines. Anybody seen this little ad advertising small windmills? It features a 50% federal investment tax credit and a 50% U.S. REAP grant, that's renewable energy the REAP grant, and Section 179 allowing for accelerated depreciation. So let's just do some numbers. Yeah. Numbers are kind of fun. Think about it a little bit. We're gonna build a great, yes.
What if you decide to sell the property? What does that do to the lease?
The lease stays with the land. And if you sell the property, you buy the land and the lease. So,
What if they don't want to do the lease?
you won't sell your property to me. You might find somebody else to sell it to, it won't be me. I can't afford to turn around for all those driveways. I can't afford to farm around all their pivots. I got a 36-row planter, and it costs me $450 an hour tack time. That leaves me $350,000, million, that is, that I need to get out of my pocket. But then, there's a 50% investment tax credit. I'm just going to take 30% of that. I'm going to knock another $150 million. Thanks, taxpayers. Let's see, that gets me down to $200 million. So I counted for the grant and the investment tax credit, only the face value. Remember, under the 50% tax credit, this should be double compared apples to apples. Now, I got this here as my cost basis. I can depreciate that thing. Part 179, I'll take accelerated depreciation on this number here and deduct that from my cost, because $350 million will save me, if I'm in the 50% tax bracket, it'll save me $175,000 in taxes. 25, that's billion. That's billion. So now I built a $500 million wind farm for $25 million out of my pocket. We're going to run this thing for 5 years. Because the statute of limitation on depreciation recapture expires in 5 years. That's one reason why they sell these things like commodities. They'll take the depreciation, they'll sell it to another company. And many times, the other company they're selling it to, if I'm the parent company, and this is the company that owns this, they'll sell it to this company, and this company owns them both. Based on the sale price of this company, if it runs the depreciation rate again. And that's sweet. It's just a play on financial entities if you set your shell companies up correctly. So now, it's been 5 years. Getting close to 5 years, we're going to sell this thing. We got to get out of town because the neighbor says we clipped one of his tile lines, and there's 35 acres of swamp ground now, the best part of his property, and it's backing up on the neighbor, and he's mad too. He can't plant anymore. He said we cut on the tile lines accidentally. And we're looking at maybe a lawsuit. But maybe not. We got our LLC filed with Delaware. It costs a lot of money to hire an attorney to go to Delaware and file a lawsuit. But 35 acres or 200 acres of corn, pretty good deal, you know. Not only that, the neighbor's grandson took a grain cart full of corn through there, tried to get to the other side, and he got her stuck. Now this is hypothetical, folks. He got her stuck. Took a 100-foot cable, 2 4-wheel drive, loader tractor, pulled him out. He's mad. We got to have these babies sold before we end up in court. Okay, we listed for half price. We listed for $250 million. We're listed for $250 million. We get an offer of 200. We counter at $225 million, and the guy takes it. So we sold $225 million. We countered. We had an offer 200. Asked 250. Sold it for $225, and we're getting out of town as fast as we can. Monday morning, we're going to divide the money, we're going to pay off the bank, dissolve the LLC, and we're out of there. So we take the 25 down to the bank, pay this 25 million off, write a check to Steve and me, each for $100 million, 5 years, close the LLC, nothing left to sue. We're gone. Maybe we'll create a new LLC, come back to Knox County, then we're going to Windfarm. Do it again. A lot of maybes. I got a lot of hypotheticals, but there's a lot of things you guys need to think about if you even consider signing one of these leases. There's a lot of things that pop up that nobody's thought about yet. Okay, thanks, Steve. Part of the inefficiency of these wind turbines is the physical fact that every time you convert one form of energy to another form of energy, you lose energy. If you want to charge a battery, you're converting AC power to DC power, you lose a little energy there. You charge a battery, the battery gets hot, you lose a little energy there. The battery gets hot, you discharge it too. So you get the idea of it. We're taking kinetic energy out of the atmosphere, and we're turning it into mechanical energy, going into a generator, and then the generator is turning mechanical energy into electricity. So there's 3 steps there. You're going to lose efficiency from converting one form of energy to another one. Now, the wind turbines generate AC power, and a nice, smooth AC power is what we use to run our motors and stuff. Well, the wind turbines, depending on how they're running, they might have different wavelengths of AC power just depending on the wind and the intermittency of the wind. You can't put this out there on the grid. The reason is 3-phase electricity, for instance, is 3 sine waves superimposed on each other perfectly. There you go. How's that look? That's 3-phase power. 120 degrees perfectly apart. They don't get tangled up with each other because the wavelength is perfect. The wavelength from here to here to here to here, the wavelength is perfect, the wave angle is perfect, and the frequency is 60 hertz. It makes our motors run 1760 RPM. If you put this up there, we'll have blackouts like nothing. So the wind, it's all incorporated up there, but this stuff gets converted to DC power. That's straight line power, direct current. This is alternating, this is DC power. And then this is inverted to a modified sine wave, and in a crude form, a modified sine wave looks like this. Now, technology has got that refined a lot. There's your modified sine wave. You're just taking the DC power and putting it into a neutral, a positive, a neutral, a negative, a neutral, a negative, and a neutral, and a positive. And if you stand back far enough, this kind of looks like a wave, like a digital picture, you know. And that's been refined pretty good. So today, it just looks like a lot of little segments following this curve here, see? But it's not pure electric, not pure AC power. Your motor will run with a little vibration in it. And it will take a little more of this power to develop the same horsepower in your motor. So let's say that you went down to the hardware store 5 years and 2 days ago and you bought a brand new refrigerator. It said $150 tax credit on the side of it and energy efficient. And all of a sudden it's broke down. Well, were you running this stuff through it? We don't know what's coming in on the grid. Probably a little bit of that, but anyway, they last about 3 days after their warranty. And then you pull them out, put them in a dumpster, pay the guy to haul them to the landfill. And he buries the thing right next to all the windmill blades, because this might have a little freon in it as hazardous waste. You've probably seen a picture of all the windmill blades being buried in Casper, Wyoming, in landfill. Well, so you go down to the hardware store and you buy another one. Guess what? You notice it says, made in China. So you go out to landfill and you look at them windmill blades. Guess what? It says made in China. See what's going on here? Probably. So there you go. That's enough for that. See if we got anything else pressing for you. Okay, question? Yes?
What does this do to our environment? When the windmills
Well-
are going around and around, and the animals, and including us?
Well, that's a good question. But
No one's thought about that.
the noise is one thing. The blinking lights, and the shadow flickers like a strobe light coming through your house. I live 4 miles away from the nearest turbine. I live in a steel frame house. I built it like a machine shed. It's got steel studs, steel shingles, steel rafters, steel floor joists, and a poured basement, concrete basement. And in the winter, when the ground is frozen, I swear I can feel the vibrations in my house. I go outside, I can't feel it, I can't hear it. But even though I'm 4 miles away, once in a while, when the air density is right, I can hear the turbines over there 4 miles away at my place. What it's doing to me, I don't know. However, I did receive some information just a couple of days ago. I received it Tuesday night at that meeting I had in Whitewater about colts, baby horses raised near wind turbines, apparently are absorbing enough vibration that is deforming their feet. And this, they prove, is correct, and they want a court case on it. Because they brought some colts in from another area and grew them up, and they had the same foot problem. And so if it's doing that to colts, what's it doing to us? Another study was done in the United Kingdom on badgers. Badgers are pretty territorial type animals. They dig a hole and that's their home. Come hell or high water, I ain't moving. Well, they did a hair sample on the badgers. They put a little barbed wire or something down there and snagged a little hair. And then they did the same thing a long ways away from the turbines. And then they analyzed the hair for a stress hormone called cortisol. And it was many, many times higher in the badgers that live next to the wind turbines than it was on the badgers that live a long ways away. So there's noise that you can hear, and then there's infrasound, very low frequency, that you can't hear. And some people say that affects their sleep. That's awful hard to prove because it's very, very, you can't hear it.
So I can't understand why anyone would want one of those. I don't understand it.
I don't understand it personally either. I wouldn't be standing here.
And if we have them close to our town, that's gonna be just as bad.
I wanted it so bad, 15 years ago. I wanted to be the first guy. And I wasn't going to be renting my land anyway. I'm going to be the developer. I'm going to be the guy getting all those tax credits. I didn't realize at the time what I'd do to my neighbors. The lights, and, the noise, and the vibration. I just didn't realize that. It puzzled me, you know, and it's, you can see how, when the wind is blowing, what that does to the economics of a coal plant. If the wind is blowing, utilities, by law, have to buy the renewable energy. Meanwhile, the coal plant here, he's got it hot, he's still scooping coal, but it issues it out the side into the cooling pond because he has no place for nobody to buy his electricity. So he's going broke, or he's raising his prices. And a lot of them have dropped out of the market. They just went into a maintenance schedule of planned obsolescence. They quit doing their maintenance and run out about 15 years when they normally overhaul their plant, call it good, close her down. Pretty soon, if that continues, we'll be depending on undependable power. And the government will have you under control. Get electric cars, you're not going to go very far. And the only time you're going to go very far at all is if the wind is blowing, if we get rid of our dependable. You see, what would you give at 3 o'clock in the morning, 30 below zero, 40-mile-an-hour wind, the wife's not happy and you got 3 sick kids, roads are blocked, all you got is electricity. What would you give for dependable power at that time of your life? What would you give? It's priceless. What would you give for undependable power at that time? It's worthless. Absolutely worthless. So why are we building these things? Guys, there's something going on in Washington that doesn't pass the sound practical judgment test. That's a definition of common sense. Sound practical judgment in the absence of specialized knowledge or training. Normal native intelligence, common sense. We don't have that. Something's going on in Washington, I swear. But I can't put my finger on who's driving this. But it's about money. Not much happens in this country without money. You don't like turbines? Well, it's about money. And it's about the price you put on your life and the visual and whatever. You probably don't know all these numbers.
My question is, the ones that have signed contracts or leases with this wind company, to get out of it, couldn't they, I mean, they really can't get out of it, but couldn't they talk to their Knox County zoning or the commissioners to make sure that this project really doesn't go, so it doesn't affect landowners nearby?
I'd be very qualify my answer as not being an attorney. I'm a farmer, and sometimes I have my attorney cap on, she just got to. But once you sign that document, that's a legal document. You're tied into it for 40, 50, up to 90 years, and it's renewable at the lessee's option, not the lessor's option. So you're in that thing. I'd say the only hope you would have, or the best hope you would have, is to put your feet in the ground and stay put and have a very logical basis for your opinion. And what has in the past stopped them is wider setbacks. Wider the better. Another thing that I think would stop them is, and this is a very reasonable request, is when this thing is done, and it will be done, as soon as we get it in administration and eliminates tax credits, this whole thing's going to be over with. and there'll be junk everywhere. And unless you have the money in the bank to take the junk out, they're probably going to stay there. Let's take the concrete, for instance. There's, in the neighborhood of 1,000 yards of concrete, and it's shaped like a chocolate kiss. They pour a big floor, and then it comes up kind of like this, and like that, and then it kind of back down again. And there it is. And they got lots and lots of bolts and rebars up here, going down in here, see? That they bolt this thing to, and then it goes on up. And this is about 12 to 15 feet deep. That's a lot of concrete, a lot of rebar in those things. And a lot of money, at $175 a yard. It's going to cost you a lot of money to build that too. But it is a very reasonable request. You have put this on land that is in our county, and its value is important to our county because of tax purposes. If you leave something on our county and it's going to litter it, it could easily devalue the property. So they say, well, we're going 4 feet off the top. There's 4 feet, that won't cost very much. Covered up with dirt. Well, they built these on top of a hill, subject to wind and water erosion. 20 years, you'll be square dancing on this. You know, it's not going to be 4 feet for very long. That's the point I'm trying to make. Some great-grandson may come along with a shank, and he'd never know there was a windmill, and he'll hit something, and it'll just stop him. And hope to heck he don't break a rib on the spinner on the steering wheel when he stops. It's going to stop him pretty fast. If you insist, and I mean put 1 foot here and 1 foot here, and I am not going anywhere till you guys get your zoning regulations set in concrete that this concrete will be removed, ground, separated, and the cement delivered to the county to specified locations in the form of acceptable road aggregate. I don't think they're going to like that. I wrote, when I had my attorney hat on, zoning regulations, and I'll read them to you, and I'll tell you why I wrote this in particular. Your wind turbine company shall be required to escrow an amount of money equal to the bid guaranteed within a perpetual decommissioning contract signed by an approved demolition company capable to, at any given time, remove all turbine infrastructure, both above and below ground, and restore the property to its original condition. So if Steve is a construction guy, we go to him. Steve, what do you want this year to take this out? Deliver it to us in form of road aggregate, and he'll give us a number. And then the wind company escrows that amount of money. And we ask him next year, what will you take? Make a 1-year contract with him. And maybe the price went up. Okay, wind company, you gotta kick in a little more in your escrow account because this guy wants more money to take this out. Now you can take it out yourself, you can do it cheaper, but we want the money in the account. And somehow we want to secure that it will be enough to do it. And they won't like that. Okay, turbines. And I recommended 2 miles right here. There's other counties in Nebraska have gone to 5 miles. And it could be anything, but the wider the better, if you don't want them. Turbines shall have no less than a 2-mile separation from residential property lines. And keep in mind, I'm 4 miles away and I can still hear them. And shall have no less than a 2-mile separation between turbines. I'll get to one more point here and you'll see why, how they can affect. They can take kinetic energy out of the air. I mentioned that. I'll get to that in a minute when I get through this. Okay? No less than a 2-mile separation between turbines. That's going to spread them out. Furthermore, any turbine sited within sight of any current current county resident must have written permission granted by said resident to do so. So if you could see it, you better come talk to me, and I'm gonna sign an agreement with you if you got enough money. Something like that. In other words, they gotta talk. They can't just build a turbine and affect somebody's life. Height, noise, and shadow restrictions. We're gonna have some pretty stiff restrictions. I've got an article over here, way on this end of the table, that Virginia University, back in 2017, was working on a turbine prototype 500 meters tall. That's over 1,600 feet. It was going to bend like a palm tree and flex a little so they could build it that high. That was the original idea, but the alternative was to support it with cables and put helicopter blades on top so they could run cables to the top of that. So I did some calculations. We got a quarter section of land here. And you put one of them big suckers right in the middle and support it with cables. If you draw a 45-degree angle from the top of this thing, it will fit in a quarter section if you go all the way out to the corner post. And then it would have descending smaller ones. So you see what will happen to your farm if you don't have some height restrictions. All these are, you got a farm around them? You put cattle out there, will the old bull get enough sleep at night so he can get up in the morning and do his work? Maybe not. This has never happened yet, but it was a prototype in 2017 for Virginia University. Another thing, you all see the picture of the vortices, the fog, and it blew through when the wind came up in the morning, it blew through the turbines. You see all the vortices on those turbines? Okay. Here's your wind valve. And spooling off behind, you got these vortices. And each, they're twisted because those things are spinning, they're twisted like a rope, like a DNA helix. And a flock of birds flies back through here. See, the vortice is like a horizontal tornado with very, very low pressure inside of it. Very high pressure around the outside, trying to get into the low pressure on the inside, and depending on what side of the equator you're on, those things either going like that or going like that, and they're just like horizontal tornadoes. A flock of birds flies through there, and they get the bends, high pressure, low pressure, high pressure, low pressure, and the nitrogen gas in their blood turns to bubbles because of the difference in the pressure. Like if you're a diver and you come up and decompress, the blood boils, the nitrogen turns into a gas, your heart don't pump gases very good. Down they come, sudden stop when they hit the ground, dead bird. Big birds like raptors get hit quite commonly with the blades because they like to fly backwards. You get a head into the wind, looking for a mouse, and all of a sudden, bonk. They call them goose grinders in Lincoln County, Nebraska. There you go.
I guess when you're talking about these setbacks and stuff and following rules for these things, like didn't Stanton County change their regulations down there to basically make these things impossible to run the stand?
Yeah, I don't know what they ended up with, but thank you for coming, everybody.
I don't remember. So my point with that is there's a lot of counties doing this. It just takes a political will to do it. It's not like it's unfair if you don't want to her question about, even if you did have people sign leases and they don't really want to make it more, there's still a way to make it stop.
The only people that could, in theory, would be zoning. Make it so it's not financially feasible to build it. But with you, with depreciation, with the land values, with this and that, when they're gone or whatever, I'm just an acre donor. I don't own a quarter, and it's not about the money, but my whole thing, I don't know. Me as an acre donor, say I put my acres for sale for $350,000 right now. say there's 20 people interested in buying my house. You put one of these in the backyard, do you think that list is still going to be 20?
Doubt it. That's
So in theory, I'm losing money. I'm losing potential buyers because of this. But I don't have that big of a voice because I own 9.5 acres.
It isn't just your 9 acres, it's all of us that own 1,000 acres. When they
Yeah.
start putting them in, it's devaluing all of us.
I'm just saying
I
in
know.
general, my voice is
I'm
pretty
just saying
weak
here, but
in this.
anybody that owns 500 or 1,000 acres, and you put one of these in
Yeah.
there close to it, or start putting these in there, it's gonna devalue all of our land, because who's wanna come out there and buy 40 acres to build a house on,
Yeah.
or a place to hunt?
Like, who's gonna wanna put a house in the corner?
Yeah.
You could sell an acreage lot for a pretty reasonable price, but if there's a big windmill sitting in the border, like, who's gonna wanna live by it?
That's what I'm saying. So, in theory, my whole piece of the land where I live, if this goes through, I'm moving.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many will do that, but as the county.
I really doubt that your taxes will go down, though.
Well, I'm just saying, in general, that
Yeah.
we need to look at the big picture. Once again, I'm just a little guy, but in theory, this is widespread.
Besides just being a money laundering operation for like Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street, that's basically all it says, is they're just washing money, these tax credits. Like, what benefit does this provide to any local community? Because there's no jobs with these things here. Like, I'm just saying, that's like a straight up question, and like, I have my mind made up on them already, but is there any net benefit to this?
If you're asking me, it's no. They'll profess to pay property taxes. However, you've seen on the cash flow that those property taxes will not be generated by the generation and sale of electricity. Can't happen. Their profits come from tax credits and grants and things like that. They convert those tax credits into cash. There's a process I didn't mention. It's called tax equity financing. I'm going to run you guys way late, but I'm going to skip that. But it changes tax credits into tax-free money. The question I would ask the wind company if they were sitting here right now and they said, well, look at all the property taxes we pay. Where does the money come from that you're using to pay the property taxes? And unless they come up here and show me a positive cash flow, which I don't think they can do, I've asked them, and they've never done it. Those property taxes that they pay will come from the conversion of tax credits into cash, and they'll pay the county a few property taxes. But here's the deal. If, in fact, they generate local property taxes by building wind turbines, those taxes will be considered by the state as locally generated taxes. And if your school district has any state aid to education, if you get $1 million from the wind turbines, they will cut your state aid by $1 million because they said you just generated $1 million up here with the wind turbines, and you no longer need state aid. So, locally, you net zero. And if they do pay property taxes, it's money that originated in this back pocket and got reversed and sent back out to them in the form of a tax credit and converted into money that they use to make you feel like they're a benefit to the community.
So you're selling your soul to the devil, basically.
What's that?
You're selling your soul to the devil. If you're
Yeah,
selling it.
and you don't understand. Solar collectors, here's an item I didn't pick up. There's your solar battery right here. Every kernel is solid sunshine, and it's no coincidence that it's the same color as the sun. Solar collector. And we're taking millions of acres out, building solar collectors. Why? Grants, tax credits, depreciation, all that sort of thing. We're taking land that could raise this. It's a battery. Put it in the bin, lasts a long time. Turn it into hamburgers, fuel, all kinds of things. Corn syrup, corn oil. things here and finish this up. This will stop, I think, any wind company. Well, let me go through number 4. No wind project sales transactions will be official unless approved unanimously by both the zoning board and the commissioners. One thing I forgot to tell you, remember when we sold that wind farm, paid off the bank, split the money? We were in a hurry. We were worried about that guy suing us because we cut his tile land. We were also worried that the commissioners would remember that we were a little behind in paying the property taxes. We want to get that thing sold before the commissioners found that out. So I'm taking care of that right here. No sales transactions from one wind company to the other will happen unless officially and unanimously approved by the zoning board and the commissioners. So they have a chance to make sure there's no pending lawsuits, and they have a chance to check with the state to see if the $3,518 per megawatt tax has been paid at the state. This all slid by the commissioners in Antelope County, and one of the guys in the audience in the afternoon of that meeting previously checked with Lincoln to see if the taxes were paid, and they were not. So they were going to approve the sale of one wind farm to another. And this guy said, well, are the taxes paid? They said, well, I'm sure they are. They were supposed to be about 90 days ago. By now, I'm sure they are. And he said, well, I'm sorry, folks, I'm sure they're not, because I just checked with the state. So they tabled it, and sure enough, they had to pay them before the board approved the sale. So that's one little slip. Another thing, if you could get them up and show me or you a 5-year cash flow that actually worked without artificial money coming in for me and you, I might take another look at this. But I say a 5-year cash flow based on previously operated wind projects shall be presented to the Economic Development Department for analysis. This will include all expenses from project inception, including but not limited to legal, lobbying, engineering, environmental, construction, operation, and decommissioning. All electrical sales will be based on contractual wholesale prices, and all power consumed will be based on contractual retail prices, common for similar commercial consumers. Furthermore, all gifts, grants, subsidies, tax credits, including depreciation or other incentive regardless of origin, will be accounted for, as well as complete and thorough explanation of how the financials work within the master business plan. A current balance sheet for their operating entity, as well as all entities in the ownership structure, shall be submitted for analysis of financial stability. You see, an LLC is a limited liability company. The whole idea is to not keep much money in there in case you do get sued. It doesn't mean you're not liable for liability. It means you just don't have enough money to be liable, to pay the liability. That's why they call it an LLC. Okay. All property tax levies concerning wind projects will be based on actual proven construction costs to be paid in advance. I asked our assessor how they assess the wind projects. How do you assess their roads that go into their farm? Well, we don't have any way of doing that because we've never done it before. We just ask the wind company. Well, that don't work. I want to see actual paperwork, what it exactly costs. We'll base our property taxes of a percentage of that. Pretty simple. Guys, I got more. If you got time, I got time.
I just got one more short question. We have to renew these leases every 7 years, correct?
Say that?
And then every 7 years you renew the lease?
Unless, yeah.
Okay, so what if it gets in 7 years, you don't want to renew it? Are you out?
If you are in a legitimate situation where you need to sign, no, you don't need to sign. If you can hold them off for 7 years, but they've got ways of extending that 7 years.
Well, you could get out of it at that time.
I think you could at that time. I think the easiest way is to present factual, irrefutable information to your commissioners and hope they see it your way. And, something reasonable, something you can back up. You can't just go in there and complain about a problem without having a solution to it.
But if you don't resign, can they come back on us?
I don't know how. If the lease Guys, are you tired?
Do we know
Not quite yet.
She's got a question?
Back here,
who
Joe.
owns National Grid Renewables? Do we
Who
know?
owns that company? I looked it up, and I kind of had a few dead ends. I didn't bring my research back, but you could do it on the computer. Look it up. National Renewable Energy.
National Grid Renewables is what it's
Okay,
called.
there's another company that's just National Grid, I believe. And one of the wind guys at that meeting told me it's a branch of the parent company, but the computer said it was an LLC. So either him and I had a misunderstanding, or he didn't know for sure. It's really hard to find out who owns all those things, but I ended up in this particular company into a company based in Europe, and it had investors from probably Ørsted. I think it was a Norwegian company, and another company from Abu Dhabi in Saudi Arabia, I think. So there was foreign money way back up on the top of the food chain invested, and then there's smaller entities that come on down. I'll give you an example here in Wayne, best as I can figure it out. And so there's some 2+2 stuff in here, but there's a company based in Rome, Italy called Enel. They're the parent company of a subsidiary corporation based in Kansas City called Tradewind. Tradewind started a wind project right east of Wayne by Wakefield, Emerson, Allen area. And nothing kind of stalled out, but they had it for, I think, over 5 years. Then they went to the Wayne Airport Authority and asked them if they would remove their NDB beacon, which is a non-directional beacon that pilots can use for navigation to Wayne, Nebraska. It's kind of an old obsolete thing, carry over from World War II, sends out an AM radio frequency that you can tune into in your airplane and find Wayne, Nebraska if the weather's not good. It's not worth much. GPS made it obsolete. These guys went to the Wayne Airport Authority, and I got the paperwork to prove it, told them they'd give them $500,000 to take this thing out. Man, there was so much money, it shocked them. That's too good to be true. Let's table it. They sent the guy home, and they said, well, maybe we got to grab this as bird in hand. Another guy said, well, let's invite him back next week and ask for $1 million. Another guy said, let's invite him back next week and ask for $1.5 million, let him juice down a little bit. Okay, all in favor? Aye. 1.5 million, we'll take her out. Call him up, come back to the next meeting, we'll take her out for 1.5 million. Done deal. Got a contract out, wrote him a check for $300,000, that's what I got a copy of in my black bag. Said we'll give you the 1.2 balance, and we get our wind project up and running. Well, guess what? Right after that deal was signed, this wind project was sold. Sold to a new company called Rattlesnake Creek. Rattlesnake. Now, I think there's some other transactions that happened in here, but this is the basis of what I understand ultimately happened. Guess who owns Rattlesnake Creek?
Yeah.
Right here, you nailed it. They own both, left-hand sold with the right hand. And the paperwork I got here indicates about a $430 million transaction. 50% of that would be tax savings, that's $415 million. There you go.
So they made money by selling it and buying it back.
It gets rid of that regulation, so turbines can be built taller and closer to the Wayne Airport.
That's safe.
Hmm?
Simple, that's safe.
Oh yeah, that's safe, you bet. But it's legal. It's a law, but you're right. Yeah, I get it. I fly. So there's other structures. This is very simple, but there's other structures. Questions?
Doug,
You got a question?
Yes?
Doug, did you know though, like, before it was that, like what we're dealing with now is the National Grid Renewables, it was Geronimo Energy. So they go and sell it to National Grid. Is that what happened?
Well,
Because first they signed contracts with Geronimo Energy, and then now National Grid came along, and then they're basically the same looking things, and it says on there they're amending them.
well, I can only guess. I haven't done research. You certainly can't just get on the computer and research one company and find out who the investors are, who owns it, where it came from.
Because whatever happened to Geronimo Energy then?
What's that?
Whatever happened to Geronimo that they sold it now to National Grid?
I don't know if they sold all their assets and dissolved, or if...
Or does anyone know if that's here?
You just have to ask them.
Okay.
Go right straight up and say, no. It's hard to find that out because of the complexities in the structure, because you'll have a foreign corporation come over here and make a U.S. subsidiary, and that subsidiary might have 12 LLCs.
And they are both LLCs, both of these, Geronimo Energy and National Grid Renewables.
Most of the ones down here on our end that we deal with are LLCs, and they easily bought and sold, shuffle assets around. They're usually licensed in Delaware. If you look up on the leases, they're usually a Delaware corporation, and that's for favorable tax purposes. But they're also pass-through entities. An LLC passes its assets and profits upstairs to the person that owns the LLC, and then that's the person who pays the taxes. So whenever you see an LLC, you need to look for the owners of that LLC, because it's a pass-through company. It's a pass-through its profits to somebody upstairs that owns that LLC. And it's kind of hard research to do, but you can dig it out if you got the right people. But
Brad had a question.
I don't know if any of you here from Wausa County have ever looked at the commercial wind turbine zoning laws, rules, but they were put in, I don't know when the wind turbines went in up here north of Bloomfield. It's been quite a few years ago. That's when they were written. I looked at it here a couple of years ago, so I don't know all the details are. But at the time they were written, wind turbine stuff was kind of new. Basically, they were written by the wind turbine companies as a suggestion. Nobody had any ideas. Nobody knew anything. And people said, oh, that sounds good, because we want this thing. We want all that money. I sent a copy of those here a couple of years ago to an acquaintance I had down in Kansas who was dealing with a wind turbine coming in on their ranch of about 20,000 acres and surrounding them, and there's a patchwork, going to be throughout their property and other owners. And he was really up on zoning stuff. He looked at me, he laughed. He said, Pat would never, you would never see anything like that approved today. Not even close. He said, these rules are so loose and easy. And he says, he said, any wind company would jump for joy to see those zoning regulations because there's nothing to them. He said, the setbacks by today's standards are at best very minimal. I don't think there was anything set up for an escrow to remove the wind towers. They think they only got to go down 4 or 5, 6 feet and remove it. But I need to farm over the top. What kind of corn do they raise on the top of the cement slab 4 to 6 feet underground? And so, I think it's time that the rules and regulations zoning needs to be looked over and updated. And I don't know how that goes with the current plan in place, if maybe the wind turbine company has something grandfathered in. I don't know. But those, they do need to be looked at because they are at best what you'd call adequate.
the average commissioner, to no fault of his own, has never faced this, and he hasn't done 15 years of research on them. He hasn't gotten, right in the face with them people. He didn't know these numbers. He had no way of ever knowing the numbers or ever having a desire to know the numbers. That's why one of the zoning regulations should be that the wind company make a presentation least got a head start on sort this all out, but the average commissioner is simply underqualified to make any kind of regulation. I don't know how we're going to fix that. Because they can't possibly understand all the details that comes with this stuff.
Well, even at that, our 60-mile-an-hour winds yesterday, 650-foot tall tower, 2,000 feet from your house. One of those catches on fire, tips over, whatever, you're already a third of the way there.
That's right.
With 60-mile-an-hour.
You got a hot, dry day, these things can burn.
Which fire department is going to be there and have that stop before it gets to your place?
Ain't gonna happen.
No.
And now they want them like 600 to 650 feet, so I don't think they are that tall over in this other area, are they? That's what they want, a 600 to 650 foot turbine. That's what they said at that last meeting.
Yeah, that's, and the trend is higher and higher and higher.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, regardless, it tips over, it's a third of the weight of that 2,000.
Well, I got another article here that says 3,320 feet as far as that blade, had a blade come off, went 3,320 feet before it hit the ground, or it hit the ground and slid another 1,000 feet or something like that, but that's the farthest that I've ever heard of a blade throw. And just on the way up here, Glenn and I drove by a turbine, went back up and take a picture of it, but the storm yesterday must have got blew off about half the blade, could have been lightning strike, it's laying way over here in a pile. Glenn's got pictures if you want to pass it around, but your picture of the wing, the vortices, you know, the horizontal tornadoes, let's just, okay, a vortice, and as a pilot, they'll trail off sometimes a mile off of a huge aircraft, a heavily loaded aircraft, and then they dissipate by coming down and down and down, finally hit the ground, and then it's kind of like a wave in a lake when they hit the shore, that pretty much dissipate. So, let's say some engineer figures out how to harness those vortices. So you start out on your farm, you sign a lease. Oh, great big turbine here. Great big turbine here. You got these vortices trailing along. So they right behind it, they put just a little bit shorter turbine to harness those vortices all in a row. And so on across your farm, shorter and shorter and shorter, and they harvest the energy in those vortices by the time it gets off your land. How would you like that to happen? It's just a hypothetical, but if you sign that lease, you got the right to do that. Unless you specifically say only so many turbines or custom design your lease, you know, a lot of things could happen. Any more questions?
That's not in these leases though, is it? Because once you sign that lease, it basically says you're signed up to be surveyed to whatever they right on your land. And it's not like you're signing up like, well, I'll give you one. That's not what these leases do, is it?
Well, it looks to me like if you had a well-written lease and it said no turbine is going to be right there, and that's it. Looks like you could design a lease. If they sign it, you know, leases are negotiated if you haven't signed them yet, but most of the people can't imagine the possibilities.
Is there any county in Nebraska that just outlaws windmills?
You know, I have heard that that has happened. Guys, sorry, we're going to put a moratorium, an indefinite moratorium on this thing, and call it good. In fact, I got a report of the Thursday night meeting in Yankton that some of the board people showed up at the meeting. It surprised me, and they don't want turbines up there. And they talked about, that group talked about the problem with horses. And they said, we recommend a 20-year moratorium on this stuff. Now, the word I got, I don't know if this is a fact or not, but it probably is, that task force voted 7-2 to recommend to the Planning Commission a 20-year moratorium on wind turbines. If it passes the Planning Commission, it goes to the commissioners. So if it passes down, Yankton's not going to have wind turbines, and that's the reason why. They just have a lot of medical unknowns, and we're just going to table this thing basically. If they come back and sue you, Cedar County presented the 2-mile setback, or 1 mile or whatever it was, David Levy, their attorney, was sitting there, sitting in the back, and he said, well, maybe we'll have to litigate that. And my commissioner in my district, Craig Bartles, in his deep voice, said, did I just hear a threat? And he started backpedaling. But I'd take him to the wall, like that concrete, and they wanted to sue me over that. Okay, get your feet raised. We're going to figure this out. Figure it out as soon as you want. But if you got a good, irrefutable reason for one zoning regulation that they can't live with, if you can defend that, you're off the hook if you sign the lease. But you just can't come in there with a shotgun approach. It's too easy to refute a whole bunch of arguments. You break this one and this one and this one and they don't look very good. But if you got one good, irrefutable, solid as a rock position and argument that they can't burn a hole in, you're in a good position. You got to have a lot of people backing you. You got to remind them, we're running this country for, of, and by the people. That's why we still got that thing hanging on the wall right side up. If we flip that over, it's a sign of distress and it's a legal way to display the flag. We're approaching that, I think. Now keep in mind, one little last comment, if you want to draw the line here.
Yes.
Okay, if you got a lease, you're going to get a payment. Well, we hope you are. They could not pay you and say, well, hey, we're registered in Delaware and our payment company's in China. Have you got enough money to sue us for $12,000 of rent payment or some such thing? Well, good luck. You just don't have any leverage because we don't have $1 million attorneys that are licensed to practice in Delaware and in China and all over the world. Can't afford to do that for that amount of money. Always remember, money you receive for a lease, any amount, that's taxable money. So, in the 30% tax bracket, you get a $20,000 payment. What's left in your bank when you get done paying 30% taxes? About $14,000. You get paid with taxable money. Oil companies get paid with tax credits. That's not taxable money, that's tax-free. Do the calculations on that over a 40-year career and see what the difference in your balance sheet is.